Thank you very much for coming in. I know it must have been difficult to crawl out of bed this hungover and early in the morning. So I want to start by saying thank you to our sponsors. It wouldn't be possible to do any of this without them. So yeah, thank you very much to everybody listed. Just a quick bit about me. None of this is particularly interesting though. I'm Sam. I'm the head of technology and research at Quantum. My interests are mostly around network pen testing, red teaming, and looking at physical-digital overlap things. So that's stuff like RFID swipe cards and lockpicking and like CCTV security systems and things like that. Right, so this talks about things that you can do as a small business to protect yourself. Obviously, most people don't go into business thinking, you know what, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to be secure. That kind of comes as an afterthought. Usually the purpose of making a business is to make some money, and you kind of want to just keep making money. And sometimes security is an afterthought that just has to be done so that you can keep running your business. So obviously we want to make security as easy as possible because we don't want to make it difficult because then no one's going to do it. So the point of this talk is that, yeah, you've decided that you need to do some security. You don't know what that is. Here's 10 cheap or free things that you can do yourself before you go out and spend $1 million on firewalls and putting in every bit of security software under the sun, and then hopefully you can continue to make profit in your business. This is just a brief list of the things that I'll be talking about today. So if you just want to take a picture of this and then leave, you've got like 90% of the talk already, so that's great. The first one is around creating an inventory. The second is around patching. Then, yeah, regularly review the accounts that you have, making sure those accounts have the least privilege that they need. Then separating people's daily accounts from their administrator accounts. Having a password so that the passwords that they're using for those accounts aren't the same password. Enabling multi-factor authentication on those accounts because eventually those passwords are going to get compromised. Encryption because, yeah, stuff eventually gets stolen, so you just want to make it as difficult as possible for someone to make use of that after they've stolen it. And then once things have gone very badly, having a plan in place before things go bad is always easier than trying to do it afterwards. And then being able to restore your business to that point where it was actually making money again with backups. So with a bit of, I guess, crowd interaction here, how many of you have worked at a business that has a cupboard somewhere that has looked like this? You might have had a blanket draped over the computers. They might have had a sticky note on them that said, do not turn off. The problem with this is also no one knows what's on those servers. No one knows how to fix them. There's no documentation. We had a client recently who had 2 boxes like the one in the middle there. And they thought like, oh, we're perfectly safe here. We've got a backup of the box that we don't know what it does, like a disaster failover. Everything's going to be fine. And then one day they tried to patch one of those boxes because it was very out of date and was vulnerable to everything under the sun. And the whole box crashed and they weren't able to restore it properly, and now they just have one of those boxes. So that's not good. But yeah, you can't patch what you don't know that you have. So if we go back here and you don't know what is on any of these computers, how are you going to secure it properly? This can also extend out to like devices that your staff have. How do you know what laptops your staff have? How do you know how many of them there are? When someone leaves your organization, do you know that they've actually returned all of the equipment that you have that has access to all of your internal network and things like that? It doesn't have to be strictly down to those devices though. It's also good to record what software licenses you have. What do you have that's in the cloud? How many people in your business have access to that cloud accounting service that has access to all of your financial data? How many of those people left like 10 years ago but still have access? Building up that list doesn't have to be difficult. It can be as simple as putting the details into an Excel spreadsheet and keeping track of them. You don't need to buy an expensive asset management tool. For a long time, as a business that does security, we track these things in an Excel spreadsheet. That looks pretty jank when you open it up, and it's just lists of laptops of things that have been assigned to people. But then you can move into having a proper asset management tool one day when you actually need that functionality. It's more important that you just start doing it today so that you have something rather than having nothing. In terms of the asset management tools that you can get for this, there's actually a lot of really good free ones available. A lot of them are open source as well, so if that's the sort of the bent of your business is that you only use open source things, most of the free ones are all open source, which is great. Cool. So as a part of this talk, I kind of want to give some stories of things that we've seen out in the wild. There's no end to the number of network pen tests that discover things that no one knew that were on the network. That can be the TV that's sitting on the corporate network, or a Raspberry Pi that someone's just plugged in and has been left there for 10 years that has access to everything because for some reason the firewall got opened up for that. But yeah, knowing about those things so that you can then take appropriate steps to patch them is sort of pretty critical to looking after your network. Yeah, so once you've got that list of devices and assets, you can then go into patching them and making sure that they've been hardened appropriately. It's easy to go and register for the security notifications on the software that you use. Most professional software will have some way that you can register an email address and they'll tell you when they want you to go patch things. If it's something that you've got on GitHub or that you've pulled from some other open source location, just turn on notifications so that you get told to, hey, we've released all these new features and we fixed all these CVEs, please go patch. And then as a small business, probably one of the things that you want to do is define a patching window. So this is a lesson that we learnt internally, quite painfully. Don't patch things in the middle of the day. Things will break. So yeah, when you have all your remote staff calling you up saying my VPN is broken and I can't do anything and yeah, I can't do any work, that's obviously not good when the whole point of doing this is that your business can continue to make money. So yeah, it doesn't have to be 2 a.m. in the morning for your patching window. We've got ours at just 5:30 on a Wednesday because everyone's kind of finished working by then, and it works for us. We don't want to be up at 2 a.m. in the morning, but everyone knows that on Wednesday, stop working at like 5:15 so that we can patch everything up and it's all fine and that we have enough time to fix things before they're supposed to start working again on Thursday morning. So this is a bit of a common joke, I guess, amongst the security, like pen testing community, is getting your 10-year badge for exploiting things that have been around for a long time and should have been patched forever ago. The one of these that I found is kind of a sad story. I got really excited during this pen test of I'd found this amazing XXE vulnerability and I'd got RCE on this this application that the customer had built. And I was like, here we go, this is gonna be it. I'm gonna get my first CVE. It was quite a while ago. Unfortunately, after going through all the steps of exploiting it and writing it up, and we discovered that the bit of, sorry, am I turned off? No? Oh. Can you guys hear me? Cool. That they'd used some sort of plugin internally that actually had this vulnerability, and if I'd been able to Google it properly at first, I would have saved myself like a day or so of exploiting it and just like dropped the code in there and got in straight away. But it was still kind of nice to get that like, yay, badge. Yeah, regularly reviewing your accounts. So yeah, you want to pull up that list from your inventory again. Are those people that have laptops assigned to them still there? Do they still have those laptops, or is it a contractor that left 10 years ago? Like I was saying before, like all those cloud services that you use, Does anyone in the room think they actually have a comprehensive list of every cloud service that your business uses? And do you know who has access to those accounts? Okay, I'm going to take the silence as a no one has that, so that's great. Yeah, when we do pen tests, we find this pretty constantly. Like finding old accounts that are easy to compromise is like a very low-hanging fruit of getting access to stuff. When we go and do like more security audit kind of things, almost always we find old accounts and access, like access cards, so RFID, things like that, or people with way too many permissions for absolutely everything. It's pretty frequent in the IT industry for people to move around within roles, even within the same business, and people tend to accumulate permissions over time. And that goes very badly when you end up with someone who was a developer and then became a tester for something or a project manager, and they have access to all of your dev servers and then all of your test servers, and then they move into the operations team and now they have access to all of your production servers. Like, this person now has access to absolutely everything, and that's not really appropriate for their job. So yeah, this is, the easiest pen test of my life was one, we did a network pen test, got domain admin, that's great, go and have some beers. Took about most of the week to get domain admin. If you're not familiar with doing network pen testing, like within a corporate environment, getting domain admin is usually kind of end game. That's it, you have access to everything now. We came back the next year thinking that like, oh yep, we gave them the report that has, here's how to fix everything, and we're gonna be in for a hard time. This isn't gonna be as easy as it was. We're gonna have to really like bust our asses to like get something this time. Walked in, got domain admin within the first 5 minutes. The domain admin account that I had set up last year for myself after getting in was still active. So yeah, that was a great report that had like one very red finding across the front of it of please go and review literally everything that you have because this isn't going well for you. If they haven't removed my domain admin account, that I explicitly told them like, hey, the very first thing you need to do is go and remove this. If they haven't removed that, then there's going to be a whole load of other accounts that are still in there that have excessive privileges that have been there for way too long. Like this, which was one from a pen test a couple of weeks ago. This account has been around for the last 17 years without its password being changed. This is not great. Yeah, least privilege, so this is kind of one that we've touched on earlier as well, was often things get assigned way too much access to do what it actually needs to do. Often in operational work, or in development work that becomes operational work, I guess, there's the priority on just get it done, we'll tighten it down later, we'll fix things up. Just give that service account access to literally everything so that it stops complaining and it does the like one database thing that it's supposed to do. That's not great, because then once you compromise that account, you can then use it to do all of the other things that it doesn't really need to do as a part of its real job. The second line seems kind of like a joke, like does your receptionist need domain admin? But that's for real, and that was what got us there one time. You compromise the receptionist because they're gonna click on all the phishing links that you send them. And that's it, you win straight away again. Like, that's the end of the game. That was not as much fun as it should be, really, because you expect it to be a bit more challenging than that. Yeah, so the story for this one is not great. It kind of relates to the service account that I was talking about earlier. So yeah, we found a service account. It was kind of a conglomeration of issues, more than just one service account that had excessive privilege. That was kind of like the bad thing in the end that got us everything. We got access to read their Active Directory, pulled out a full list of all the accounts. One of the first things you do there is then just go spray like username equals password. And there was a service account that had been set up exactly like that as a domain administrator to just do everything. So yeah, another one of being in the door about 5 minutes and then walking away finished for the week. Yeah, privileged accounts. So this can be kind of confusing because a lot of these things sound very similar, but this is different. This is about where you have users that have a genuine need to be an administrator. So that might be your IT support staff or your domain administrators. They need a daily account so that they can still do all of their emails and writing reports and things like that. But they also need an administrator account that has the functionality to go and install software or reconfigure someone's computer, or if they're a domain admin, to assign permissions to things and stuff like that. Splitting those apart so that if one of them gets compromised, the others don't, makes this so much more difficult for us. It's pretty common that we'll find a list of high-value accounts and then we'll specifically target those. When you start separating that out so that those high-value accounts are almost never being used except for the rare cases where you do have to go and update something or assign permissions to someone, it makes it way more difficult for us to compromise them, because you are going to get owned. Someone is going to click on the phishing link. But if you start splitting out those privileges, it becomes really difficult to escalate across accounts. So yeah, the story for this one, again, isn't particularly interesting. It's just literally every job is the admin is using their admin account as a daily driver. Often this is, you jump onto a computer, dump LSAS so you get some hashes, break that hash for the admin account, or just pass it along and you get access to everything again. It becomes way more difficult for us to do that if the admins aren't logging in anywhere as admins. We have to actually do something difficult instead. So once they've set up all of those different accounts, how do you go about securing those properly? How many people here think that they can remember one 16-character password that they use regularly? How many people here have more than 100 accounts that you use? Okay, cool. How many of you have longer than 16-character passwords for all of those 100 accounts and can remember all of those passwords, and they're all different? Yeah, if anyone puts their hand up, I know you're a liar, right? I have candy to give to anyone if they can prove it, but yeah. A password manager makes this easy. I have hundreds or thousands of accounts that we've got set up for different jobs and different services that I use and things like that. There's no way I could possibly ever remember those, but I don't have to. It also means that my passwords can be of massive arbitrary length of 100 characters, 200 characters, whatever. There's no way that anyone's going to go crack those through any sort of hash cracking or anything like that. It's not realistic, and it's not realistic for me to remember those, but I don't have to. Yeah, we kind of already covered this one, password reuse, where those admins have a daily account and a split out admin account. We've come across this before. You compromise the low privilege account, then just go I wonder if they've just used the same password. Of course they have, and that usually gets you in the door as well. Multifactor authentication. Again, yeah, you're going to get breached at some point. You can't keep your passwords safe forever because that's not on you. Lots of other businesses will have your passwords for different things, and you can't necessarily trust that they're going to keep them safe. The way this works is you provide your username and password and log in. You get a little prompt up on your phone that says, did you actually log in, yes or no? Or it's got the 6 digits that you then type in to prove that you still have your phone. These can act as a great flag for your operational team as well if you're doing service development. If someone is repeatedly logging in but entering incorrect MFA credentials, that's probably a great flag that their password has been compromised. You should probably get in contact with them, check that it's actually them logging in and something's going wrong. If they're repeatedly entering their MFA token wrong, they probably need help anyway, so getting in touch with them, even if they haven't been compromised, getting in touch with them is going to be helpful. The story for this one is also kind of a lie. I didn't lose all my Steam games, but I've come very close to it. So yeah, I was really surprised, or like, I guess I shouldn't have been. Steam was one of the first places that I personally used that implemented multi-factor authentication. And I kept getting like little pop-ups on my phone being like, are you trying to log in here? And I was like, no, absolutely not. But that was great. That was the notification I needed that like, oh, the password that I used on that I set up when I was like 12 has been compromised, and I probably should change it to something other than like, I don't know, I love toast, to like something that's actually a proper password. Encryption, so yeah, like we were saying just before, you're gonna get compromised, data is gonna get stolen. That could be laptops that get stolen. It could be someone dumps your database. It could be somebody sniffing your traffic. Eventually, something is gonna get taken from you. If you put proper encryption on those things, it makes it way more difficult for anyone to use what they've stolen in a useful way. If you're doing development, you need to plan accordingly for this, because encryption changes over time, right? Like what's appropriate encryption today is not what was appropriate encryption 10 years ago. It's pretty common that we'll come across applications where they say, no, everything is perfectly fine, we encrypt everything, like it's totally safe, and then you look under the hood and they're just using like MD5 for everything. If you're not familiar with that, like that's no longer an acceptable standard for encryption. If you look at things like the NZCSC, which is a security manual for New Zealand of saying like, here's what's appropriate to do for government organizations, those are not acceptable. And that's going to change in the future as well. Like what's appropriate today isn't going to be appropriate in 10 years. So when you're developing something, you should build it with changing encryption in your application in mind. So don't hard code that in there as we just use this encryption algorithm, and if we ever want to change it, we have to roll out an update. Yeah, so cracking hashes for pleasure and profit. I guess this is one of my favorite pictures. I seem to put it in all of the talks that I give. Sorry. This is my hash cracking rig at home for cracking passwords. Each of the GPUs there go back like 4 deep. So there's 20-something GPUs in there. So you can use that for cracking some good hashes. But this is where I want to play a game. At the top there is a password in clear text. And the next one down, does anyone want to take a rough estimate of how long it would take to crack that? As a baseline, I want to use the AWS P3 16X large, which you can currently hire for about $25 an hour, which gives you like 8 high-end GPUs that are kind of on a similar tier to the ones that I showed you before. I have prizes if anyone wants to give it a go. Pretty close. Colder. Okay, I guess Kirk gets the candy. So the first one is not encrypted at all. Base 64 encoding things doesn't count as encryption. So I would have accepted 0 as an answer for that. We come across this pretty regularly is, don't worry, absolutely no one's going to be able to tell what the password that we send in every request is because we encrypt it with base 64. You can reverse that yourself in like, 0 seconds. The second one down there is NTLM. That's the encryption that Windows uses for storing your password internally. Does anyone want to take an under-over on how long it would take you to crack that, knowing that the password is the one above? Under-over on 2 weeks. Okay, actually just over. So that one's 15 days. Oh, shit, sorry. Now I don't have anyone. This is not going well. Maybe I'll stop throwing candy and you guys can just come and collect it afterwards. So yeah, using that instance to brute force that character space of 10 characters. So that password there is NZISM compliant, so very secure. Feel free to go and set this to be all of your government account passwords. That would be great for me. The next one down there is MD5. Like we talked about, no longer acceptable. Please don't use this. Easy findings for us. Does anyone want to take a stab at how long it would take you to crack the hash for this? Higher. Yes, it was 30 days. Thanks. And what about the one down below that? So by the $6 at the start, you can tell that that one is SHA-512, which is currently kind of considered acceptable for storing passwords. If you want to brute force that 10-character space of sort of 3 complexity, does anyone want to take a stab at how long it would take you to crack that one? Slightly less. Slightly more. Slightly less. We're getting closer. Less. Less. Closest so far. It's just under 2 years. So 550 days.
Who was the closest?
3 years, I think. Yeah, so it kind of it shows the difference between encrypting the, oh yes, sorry.
Is there any encryption method that is not crackable?
No. The concept of if you put something in, you have to get the same thing out is kind of inherent, that it's possible to crack everything because you just keep trying, right? If you just keep putting in different text values, eventually you'll get back the hash for the right one, and there you go, you've cracked the hash. Which is actually kind of how this works. It just happens that some of those algorithms take longer than others to compute, and so it's more difficult to crack the hashes back. Sorry, I forgot where I was going from here. Yeah, the whole point of this was that if you change your encryption algorithm to be appropriate for the time, you make it difficult enough that it takes long enough that it's not worth the effort of cracking your hashes, and someone's just going to move on and go and attack something that's easier. It's kind of a trade-off, really. When we come across hashes on a job, we have to make a decision for us because all of our engagements are time limited. Is it worth the effort of trying to crack this hash? And adversaries kind of work in the same way, right? For them, you may think they have unlimited time to go and break everything. And that's kind of true, but also not really, because they also have unlimited other people that they could target. Unless you're dealing with national security or you're a highly specified target for some reason, if they're targeting your tire shop versus someone's dentist down the road, if it's so much easier to hit someone else, they're just going to put the effort into that rather than spending so much time and money on attacking you. If it costs them $10,000 in AWS fees to crack your password, and they're only going to make $2,000 off you in ransomware or something like that, it's just not worth their time. So they'll move on and do something else. Disaster response. Yeah, so it's always a lot easier to make a plan before you need it. When everyone is frantically running around with their hands in the air and their hair on fire, it's difficult to know how to do things properly. Sweet. Sorry, I need to move on kind of quickly. It's good to plan for a whole lot of different scenarios. What happens when you get ransomware? How are you going to handle with that? Who do you need to call? If something gets stolen from your office, how are you going to handle that? Do you have a bus factor problem? So yeah, shout out here for what was arguably, in my opinion, New Zealand's best security podcast, which is no longer around. The bus factor was amazing. In sort of business speak, this is what happens if someone within your business gets hit by a bus. Is everything going to end? Do you have a critical person that if you don't have them, everything falls over? Maybe you should plan for when they get hit by a bus, because one day they're going to get sick, one day they're not going to be there, and one day the business still needs to keep running. When I showed this talk to someone earlier, they told me I didn't have enough pictures, so I went and found some pictures for you. Please take backups. Things are eventually going to go wrong. When it all hits the fan, you need to be able to hit reset. When you get ransomware, it's a lot easier to hit the restore button and restore everything to how it was rather than pay all the money and maybe that dodgy criminal who shut down all your computers gives you your data back. That doesn't work particularly well. Your backups should follow a 3-2-1 rule, which is you should have 3 copies of all of your data. 2 of these as backups should be on different media types. So that may be your main copy is on your laptop, you have a different copy on a flash drive sitting in your drawer, and you have another copy up in the cloud somewhere. And one of those should be off-site. So yeah, your in the cloud one fulfills that rule of off-site. The story for this was, yeah, I'm done. Okay, sorry, I'm out of time. Please come and talk to me later if you have any questions. Sorry about that, everybody. Thanks. Oh, the summary slide? Yeah, you're gonna have security problems eventually. You don't have to buy $1 million silver bullet because there is no $1 million silver bullet. Some of these things you just have to do anyway, and it's a lot easier to mature as a business if you start doing them when you're small. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, please come and talk to me later if you have any questions.